All right, so we have Zach Eikenberry with us from Hook Security. How's it going?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me, Wilson.
Awesome. No, thanks for coming along and talking a little bit about what you do and where you're from. And so let's, I guess, start from there. Where are you from originally and where are you now?
Like most people in 2023, may I say most millennials, I'm from several places. So I'm a Midwest boy originally. But prior to moving to Lakeland, Florida, for those of you who haven't been here, we're about halfway between Orlando and Tampa. Lived in Greenville, South Carolina for 12 years. Been around the country a little bit, not as much as the military families I know, but from a few different places at this point.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Welcome to Florida. How many years have you been here now?
I'm going on 2.
So you're about to experience the second year of summer here in
Yeah,
Florida.
that's exactly right. That's last year I made it by permanently switching to shorts and just putting my jeans in the closet because there's
Yep,
no time for that.
that's what you got to do around here unless you want sweaty legs.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So tell me what you're doing. Tell me what you're doing now.
Yeah, CEO and co-founder of Hook Security. We are a new type of security awareness training solution, and we specialize in training non-technical people to recognize online manipulation. And that's what we're building. We're a venture-backed company. And yeah, we're a team that's distributed all over the Eastern Seaboard, but there are a few folks in Central Florida area as well,
Oh,
in
that's
addition to
cool.
myself. Yeah.
That's cool. You say non-technical folks, right? So in today's connected world, how do we define security awareness for those folks, and why is it more important than ever?
Yeah, I think the non-technical label, because people don't know how to use technology.
Yeah,
Everybody knows how to use their phone, and technology goes out of its way to be able to be used by the lowest common denominator among us, right? What I mean by non-technical is people that do not have technical professions. That the technical professions being your engineers or your call it computer engineers, your developers, your cybersecurity experts.
sure.
These
Yeah.
are people that know how the technology actually works and it's not magic to them. The people that technology is still magic to, behind the scenes, the zeros and ones, those are the people that we believe have the most to lose and the most to gain through it. Or if they are not trained, they have the most to lose, and they have the most to gain if they are trained to recognize when technology will fail them, when technology will manipulate them, when somebody is communicating with them or using a computer or device against them. And
Oh,
that's where we specialize in. We work in that space.
okay. So how does that work for you? How do you do it different than everybody
Hmm.
else?
Yeah. So one of the big differentiators is frankly just our research and our body of research around psychology and neurological principles. When we're trying to develop what becomes a training experience for people, we're constantly looking, and we just announced a partnership with the University of South Carolina that is actually monitoring brain waves when people are going through our training. But what that actually looks like, what you actually experience, is the equivalent of SNL sketches, right? Where you are getting humorous, non-punitive training experiences that are enjoyable, that people will voluntarily opt into. So we see higher adoption rates when people are going through what traditionally in a number of training experiences prior. So what's normal in the world today is a jury duty experience where there's a few people who get super excited about jury duty, and those same people are super excited about awareness training, but everybody else hates that their number was just called. And that's how security awareness training works in most companies today. And we are here to solve that jury duty problem. And we do it, and we have a lot of fun doing it because we're creating humor based sketches.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting because whenever I think about security awareness training, I think, oh my God, is it that time of year again?
Yeah, and I think it's fascinating that most of the content providers and vendors in the space know that it's not engaging. So they'll say, "Oh, we create really engaging training experiences." What does that actually mean? That's the fascinating thing to me. because what they usually mean by that is we're still going to go over the 20 things that technical people think you should know. This is what other people think you should know. Your employer thinks you should know. But that still doesn't answer the question, what do I need to know? What is my thing? And I think when we're talking about new types of training experiences, we're talking about things that fundamentally respect the employee. They say your time is valuable. You have something to bring to the table here. We're not going to talk down to you, but we're not going to talk over your head. And we're going to give you something that you can actually utilize. Now, one of the things, if I might, Wilson, that we're leaning into heavily right now, it's in production right now, is we're helping employees take the training home to their families, their kids, their in-laws, and say, how do you recognize scams online? Right now, there is a quiet epidemic of romance scams. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. Do you know what romance scams
Like
are?
you're talking about like catfishing.
Yeah, it's a catfishing element. Yes,
Yeah.
there's usually a fake person or a fake identity on the other side. And this is such a devious social engineering. That's a big term, but it's a way of
Mhm.
manipulating people. It's a way of tricking people into thinking they're in a relationship with someone that they're actually not. And this person inevitably is someone who loves them. They can't believe that they're so lucky that they've got to finally meet. They live a few states away. They're super excited and they prey upon people who are lonely. And by the way, the latest research I saw coming out of the pandemic is over 80% of adults claim to be fundamentally lonely at least 3 times a week.
Yeah, I've read that. I read that as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. So we have a loneliness epidemic, and therefore the chance that somebody might come along and actually give them time and attention and actually help you with your loneliness, that you don't feel fundamentally alone in this world. And then guess what? This person just needs a few dollars to cover a bill because their boss messed up their paycheck. And this person also just send me a couple $1,000 and I'll get the plane ticket to come see you. Just can you help front me this money for a new business? Because I'm launching a flower shop and I want to name it after you. And I just want these are all true examples.
Really?
Yeah,
A
yeah.
flower shop?
Yep. There was a lady who sent something like $75,000
Oh my God.
to somebody who was going to build a name a flower shop after her because they were in love. And I share this to say that we have a romance epidemic. And by the way, Wilson, I don't know who listens to your podcast here, but for some of the people in cybersecurity, do you know the number one application of non-cash value gift card scams? So when somebody gets scammed out of a gift card, I'm going to another scam. Hey, I'm the boss. I need you to run to the store, buy me 5 gift cards, send them over to me. Anybody listening to this podcast, don't do that. But if somebody says that, but you're like, why do they want a Hulu or Apple gift card? Why do they want a Netflix gift card? That's because the biggest buyer of these gift cards are the romance scams factories. And so what they'll do is they'll sell these gift cards at a discount once the bad guys capture them, right? And then they'll sell them over to the romance scam artist who will then say, "Hey babe, I love you so much. I just want to get your Netflix subscription so we can watch Netflix together." And they'll take that card and buy a Netflix subscription for somebody because that card was scammed from somebody else. So these scams all build on each other.
It's a
But
racket.
it's a racket. So back to Hook Security, we help people understand that actually happens. That's a new normal for us, and that people need to step back, and we give them a lot of different ways in which they can actually think through it, address, circle back, validate communication. So we give them all the tools to do that and navigate, but they can go home and they can go up to their mother-in-law and say, "Hey, we know you're in this online relationship. Can we take a look at it? Can you tell us more about it? Because we're very
Mhm.
concerned." And now you've empowered that employee to be a full human interacting with the technology at home, interacting with the technology in their car, and helping them address online manipulation wherever it comes. And that's what Hook Security is passionate about. And that's what we're bringing to the table.
We talk about being leaders. And one of the things that we have to constantly do as security professionals is always advocate for safety, especially online safety. And I think you bring up a good point, is bringing the lessons home. One of the lessons that I bring home all the time is don't click on stuff. A
Right?
very simple one. Kids, don't, if it looks really cool and it looks really shiny, don't click on it. Don't click on it. But you bring another factor here, and that something that I haven't seen some other companies bring up is like these different kind of scams. And how did you get into this business? Is your
Yeah.
background in cybersecurity to
Actually,
get into security
no.
awareness?
No, it's not in cybersecurity. Prior to Hook Security, I was actually in education. I started 2 high
Oh,
schools and a
okay.
middle school, and I was brought into the space after I retired from building those schools, and I have that entrepreneurial arrogance, so I'm a lifelong entrepreneur, hired myself out of
Mhm.
college, and at 27, I started these schools, and I have no degree in education. I have no one gave me permission to start these schools. We just did. We grew them up. We had at one point over 600 kids, 90 full-time faculty working with them. It was a full project. And I retired from there, and I was talking with my good friend Adam Anderson, who's now my co-founder, and he had just sold his cybersecurity business. And he was telling me all about this space, the security awareness training. And it just reminded me so much of our public education system.
Mhm.
And I said to him, it sounds like we took all the bad ideas from public education and brought that into corporate training. He said, yes, that's exactly what we did. It actually started as largely like an intellectual exercise. I was like, can we solve this? Can we actually get in and stop the madness of trying to trick employees and thinking we're doing something about it? Can we stop these fake metrics? And what happens if we tell people when it comes to security awareness training that the emperor has no clothes? What do we do with some of those things? So it started intellectual. And I'll say we're 4.5 years into the journey right now. Somewhere in the last year and a half, it became personal for me. What, and I've been converted into the church of cybersecurity, as it were. And I mean that not to say it flippantly, but to say like it's very profound when you realize that people actually get hurt and lives are interrupted and
Yeah.
companies do go out of business and dreams like when a company goes out of business, that's people. There's even the CEO. Yeah, maybe the CEO was well compensated for their job and then that goes out of business. Typically, that CEO will have dependents. She or him will have somebody relying on them for their education to pay their
Mhm.
college tuition and all these. And there's this tremendous amount downhill effect. And I wouldn't be surprised if if there's a link between a rise in online manipulation and things like divorce rates or kids dropping out of school. I wouldn't be surprised if there are links, not the main factor, but contributing factors to a number of our social issues are directly and indirectly linked to online manipulation. And frankly, it's only gotten more, and maybe you can attest to your passion in cybersecurity with the rise of like artificial intelligence. And now intelligence is the ability to cast judgment on data. And when we now have to deal with a new world in which AI could be used against us, and it probably will at first. We've long had a vice to virtue cycle with technology that when we introduce new technologies, it goes through a vice cycle before it goes through a virtuous cycle. So I don't know if this might be the last
What do you
point,
mean by
Wilson.
that? Yeah.
Yeah,
What do you mean?
so there's these interesting studies where, like in Southeast Asia or in India, they'll introduce electricity, and right after that, usually it's internet access through phones. And they're like in
Mhm.
places like Malaysia, they were big into Facebook phones at one point and what have you. They introduce the technology, and guess what happens? And this might, hopefully, people aren't listening to this podcast in a car full of young kids, but the immediate behaviors will often be adult entertainment and pornographic and gambling. Those will be the first
Really?
two utilizations of the technology at large through a new community. And only after that does it cycle to virtue, where all of a sudden there's upskilling and education taking place and access to other information about how to rebuild infrastructure and participate in the larger economy. That happens after the knee-jerk reaction of everything bad you could possibly do on the technology. And I think we're going to see that same thing with AI. We're going to see a flurry of phishing attacks, which are these fake email attacks. We're going to
Yeah.
see a flurry of every type of possible issue, and we're going to go through a vice to virtue cycle. And I think a lot of the AI leaders right now are super nervous because they don't know when the virtue cycle will hit. And so they're going, AI could really stick us and it could create a long tail of vice and a long tail
Hmm.
of danger, apart from even some of the really interesting thought experiments about singularity. But anyway, that's where my passion comes in, is can we as humans actually stand up against AI? Can we be smarter than the thing we created? And that's going to be an interesting challenge for us in the coming years.
Yeah, no, it's interesting how we went from security awareness to because I'm just I guess one of the scientists over at Google just
Mhm.
left.
One of the
He's
leading
called,
guys.
yeah,
Yeah,
the godfather of AI, and he was just like, y'all need to slow down.
that's
You
right.
know what I mean?
Yeah, they don't see the virtue. He doesn't know when and if it'll be redeemed.
Yeah, yeah. And then going back to the topic of security awareness, we've already seen phishing emails being crafted very well in phishing campaigns. There's no more Nigerian prince asking for money. There's a legitimate BS,
Yeah,
well-written BS.
sure. No, we have Chat GPT like everybody else, right? At Hook, and we're asking it, what are the 10 most popular phishing emails? And guess what? ChatGPT knows, and it knows with an accuracy that's pretty amazing. And I think people do have to recognize that online manipulation, and that might be a big word, it's just threats and issues coming at you online is only going to increase.
Yeah, yeah, I think so as well. We're already experiencing it, and we're just at the beginning, really, just at the beginning. And so how do we get prepared for that from a cybersecurity standpoint, even from a non-technical person not
Hmm.
to recognize when or the scenarios if we're getting manipulated
Hmm.
through like artificial intelligence? Any
Hmm.
thoughts on that?
No, I think I don't have any thoughts on which tool set and solutions good AI will come up with. I don't know the way to stop nuclear proliferation right now when it comes to our AI tools. So I don't have an insight into that. I'm trusting a group of Elon wannabes to figure that out. The thing that I think is going to be very interesting is, are there any behaviors that do need to change by people? So when you receive an email, how do you recognize it as suspicious? Is it asking you to do something that is abnormal or urgent or is requesting something of you? That's one type of attack. Is there another in which you're being quietly brought in
Yeah, exactly.
and like socially engineered? One of my favorite social engineering stories, and this might show like why it gets really fuzzy between AI and human intelligence, or HIs, or there was a cybersecurity expert. He's a speaker, he's in the circuit going from RSAs to RSA lights all around. And there was a chat bot. This is 5, 6 years ago now, maybe even more. And this chat bot and this couple of other tools, a couple of bad guys utilized to essentially get this speaker to believe that they were creating a new conference, that they wanted the speaker to be the keynote. And this took over a year negotiating and stuff. The speaker never met anybody in person, or the video never worked for the conference calls for the conference organizers. So the speaker was socially engineered throughout an entire year, and they were utilizing this tool set and these chat bots and other things to respond, because it was found out the threat actors, the cyber criminals, whatever we call them, were foreign and their English wasn't suited well enough to engage directly. What ended up happening is they said, "Hey, we're having trouble with sponsors. Can you introduce us to a few vendors?" The speaker reached out to 3 or 4 vendors. All of those vendors agreed. They wired over something like $200,000 in sponsorships
Wow.
for this conference, only to find out that the whole thing just stopped and wasn't real. And the speaker, who was an expert at cybersecurity, had to admit that he had been scammed. He'd been socially engineered. And I think the issue with AI when it comes to security awareness training is when AI meets patience. And when we have to deal with AI over time, as it continues to interact and learn from engaging with us as people, that AI at its core, what is this language learning model? The learning is
Mhm.
very interesting because that means adaptation, that it means it's going to react to you more and more authentically over time. So right now, security awareness trainers like ourselves are constantly exploring and looking at new sets of behaviors and best practices that we can use, but it's a brave new world. And I'm very concerned about persistent and patient AI when it comes to human manipulation.
Yeah.
And we're probably going to need some of these Elon wannabes to show up and be able to tag or notice or understand when AI has generated a piece of content. And we're going to have to get that information. Otherwise, we're going to be in a lot of productivity is going to slow way down as we have to sort through our inbox and Slack messages and text messages to figure out what's authentic.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, we are just going to be paranoid. We're more paranoid than we are. It's like, is this real? Is this real? Am I being scammed? I know that there was a gentleman, a student that created some kind of algorithm that looked at the burstiness, they would say, of content that was on a page, and it would be able to recognize if it was generated by AI. But as you said before, is that these technologies are learning, right? They're learning how to interact with us better, speak or type better. It's gonna be incredibly difficult. How do you
Yeah.
tag that, right? That's
Yeah.
that's a big question for me because I'm not that bright.
We
It's like,
are.
how do I know? How do you know? It's if you know that the sequence of these two words happen, you know that it's a human, or if it's like a sequence of these 5
Yeah.
words that happen, it's
So
AI.
so to give you a little bit of solace, and it's not the best solace, cybersecurity has always been a cat and mouse game.
Yeah, of
And
course.
you've always been playing from defense from behind. It, ever since you entered the cybersecurity space. Right.
True.
It's not new territory for us to be way behind as AI accelerates ahead. That's not what I think is going to be interesting is what's the set of creative tools that we build or encourage other AI tools to build. I did interact with an interesting research group out of the University of Toronto that was authenticating communication by peripheral device entry. That is, only keystrokes on a keyboard or a mouse could verify that the input to the device came through the peripheral. Therefore, you could say with certain likelihood that it was human. And immediately, the robotic crew in the University of Toronto created a robot right through the
Yeah.
keyboard
It,
and create the mouse. And so,
yeah, it's like that one video is just like click here if you're human, and then it's it's a robot with the finger and it's just hitting the touch screen. You're just like, oh God, here we go.
that's exactly right. So I think there are going to be creative solutions. I'm actually reading up on some of this peripheral device work. I think is actually very interesting because it
That
also
is really
monitors
interesting.
how we interact with things. So if a phone is stationary and it's typed into, it can be seen as fraudulent. But if it moves around and there's a gyroscopic movement and somebody's typing while they're texting, then we can say, okay, human at least sent it. Now, is that human the person who they purport to be? I don't know. Like now we have to go back to a whole nother set. So I do think that you're right. Paranoia is going to strike at the heart of productivity. Zero trust as a mindset is going to undermine cultures of trust that our organizations are trying to build. And so you have this whole set of like HR initiatives that are going to be interrupted by the fact that like cybersecurity is going to have to take precedence over them. And call it any type of security. We like to use psychological security and safety are going to have to be at the forefront of organizations. And I don't know if that's a dystopian future or not. I'm trying to build one that has a hope to it, that people can find ways to push back against online manipulation. So I sit on the unicorn and rainbow side of the house betting on humans. And I think that's where I'm going to keep trying to push and keep trying to build out solutions over the next years to solve that.
Awesome, man. I would love to keep on going. I'm also laughing that we did not stick with any of my questions on my list today. But thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate that. And any final words about developing security leaders you want to pass on to the community?
I would say you the fundamental way to create true security awareness experiences starts with empathy for your employees, and you need to understand where they are coming from when they enter your training experience, whatever it is. You need to understand from them, their perspective, their first, and let their voice ring louder in the management meetings than anybody else's. And if you do that, you've got a shot at having a truly security aware culture.
Awesome. Thanks for your time again, Zach. I appreciate it. And we'll talk to
Thank
you
you,
later.
Will.